In the previous sections, we designed and implemented the classes ARRAYLIST class and unordered ARRAYLIST to manipulate data in an array. One of the limitations of these classes is that once you create, say, an ARRAYLIST class object, the size of the array used to manage objects remains fixed. Therefore, only a fixed number of objects can be maintained in an ARRAYLIST class object and an unordered ARRAYLIST object. Java also provides the class vector. Unlike an array, the size of a vector object can grow and shrink during program execution. Therefore, you do not need to be concerned with the number of data elements. Before describing how a vector object is used to manage a list, let's describe some of the members of the class vector. The instance variables of the class vector are protected int, element count, and protected object, element data, which is an array of references. The constructors are public vector, which creates an empty vector of the default length 10, and public vector int size as parameter. This creates an empty vector of the length specified by size. The methods are the following: public void add element with parameter object insert obj. This adds the object insert obj at the end. Next, public void insert element at with parameters object insert obj and int index. This inserts the object insert obj at the position specified by index. If index is out of range, this method throws an error called array index out of bounds exception. Next, we have public object clone. This returns a copy of the vector. Next, public boolean contains with parameter object obj. This returns true if the vector object contains the object specified by obj. Otherwise, it returns false. Next, public void copy into with parameter object dest. This copies the elements of this vector into the array dest. Next, public object element at with parameter int index. This returns the element of the vector at the location specified by index. Next, public object first element. This returns the first element of the vector. If the vector is empty, the method throws no such element exception. Next, public object last element. This returns the last element of the vector. If the vector is empty, the method throws no such element exception. Next, public int index of with parameter object obj. This returns the position of the first occurrence of the element specified by obj in the vector. If obj is not in the vector, the method returns -1. Next, public int index of with parameters object obj and int index. Starting at index, this method returns the position of the first occurrence of the element specified by obj in the vector. If obj is not in the vector, the method returns -1. Next, public boolean is empty. This returns true if the vector is empty. Otherwise, it returns false. Next, public int last index of with parameter object obj. Starting at the last element using a backward search, This method returns the position of the first occurrence from the end, which is the last element of the list, of the element specified by obj in the vector. If obj is not in the vector, the method returns -1. Next, public int last index of with parameters object item and int index, starting at the position specified by index and using a backward search. This method returns the position of the first occurrence from the end, which is the last element of the list of the elements specified obj in the vector. If item is not in the vector, the method returns -1. Public void remove all elements. This remove all the elements of the vector. Public boolean remove element with parameter object obj. If an element specified by obj exists in the vector, the element is removed and the value true is returned. Otherwise, the value false is returned. Next, public void remove element at with parameter int index. If an element at the position specified by index exists, it is removed from the vector. If index is out of range, this method throws array index out of bounds exception. Next, public void set element at with parameters object obj and int index. The element specified by obj is stored at the position specified by index. If index is out of range, this method throws array index out of bounds exception. Next, public int size. This returns the number of elements in the vector. Next, public string toString. This returns a string representation of this vector. From this slide, it follows that every element of a vector object is a reference variable of type object, because the class object, directly or indirectly, is a superclass of every Java class. A reference variable of the object type can store the address of any object. Because every component of a vector object is a reference, to add an element into a vector object, you first must create the appropriate object and store the data into that object. You can then store the address of the object holding the data into a vector object element. Because every string in Java is considered a string object, we illustrate some of the operations in the vector object using string data. Consider the following statement. Vector string list equals new vector. This statement declares string list to be a reference variable of the vector type, instantiates an empty vector object, and stores the address of the object into string list. Next, consider the following statements. String list that add element spring, string list that add element summer, string list that add element fall, string list that add element winter. After these statements execute, string list is illustrated in this figure 3.9. Now, if you have a statement system.out.println string list, this will output the elements of string lists in the following form: spring, summer, fall, winter. Now consider the following statement: string list.add element cool, 1. This statement adds the string cool at position 1. Notice the cool string is added at position 1 in figure 3-10. Spring is at position 0, cool at position 1, summer at position 2, fall at position 3, and winter at position 4. If you have an output statement system.out.println string list, this will display spring, cool, summer, fall, and winter. The class vector is contained in the package java.util. Therefore, to use the class vector, your program must include either the statement import.java.util.asterisk or the statement import java.util.vector. Let's take a look at an example program which uses the vector object. In this example, we restrict a vector object to manage elements of the same type. In this program, the object string list manages strings. As stated earlier, every element of a vector object is a reference that can point to any object, and the same vector object can be used to manage various types of objects. For example, in our main method here, we have the string lists as a new vector. Then we added the string spring, summer, fall, winter, and sunny to our string list. Then we display the elements of the string list. Then we call is empty. This will return true if string lists is empty. Otherwise, this will return false. We also have the size of the string list. And then we print the string list. Next, we call the contains method of the string list to test whether the fall string is included or is within the string list. And then we insert another element at position 1. We insert the cool string. Then we print the string lists, the elements of the string list. And then we remove the element fall. We also remove the element at position 2. So after this, we print the string list, and then we print the size and the index of the string sunny.